Hey players, it's been a long time, hasn't it? So long, and all you've gotten is a little tweak to the series name. You've all been so patient. I've got something special to show you today. You want to see it? Wait, stop, it's not my genitals. I realize now I was starting to sound, pervy. I promise you, here on A Briefish History of Assassin's Creed, the only junk you are going to see is on classical art and the Nintendo DS. Like and subscribe, and I promise to never reveal my peener to you on this channel. No, today we have a special episode centered around that teensy detail I went and left out of Brotherhood in the last entry, the multiplayer. The way I see it, this is the relevant place to discuss the whole Assassin v Assassin competitive mode. Not just Brotherhoods, but through all of the series entries that let you penetrate and pound anonymous strangers and your friends alike. While we will be skipping ahead a little bit to discuss the online portions of every game through Black Flag, there will be no single player spoilers here, and those stories will be covered in upcoming videos. Now, before I can tell you that story, I have to repeat an intro gag from the first video I made because original ideas are difficult. I have to tell you this story. Assassin's Creed was not the first single-player series to add in multiplayer, and it won't be the last. Multiplayer is one of those things that gets game publishers immediately horny, alongside lazy pre-order costumes and forgetting that 46% of players are women. Jesus Christ, Dead Island, most men don't even want that. Back on topic. Multiplayer can easily come across as a tacked-on way to try and entice a wider audience to your game. Take Spec Ops: The Line. The story is all about analyzing how fucked up the concept of a realistic war shooter actually is. War is brutal, dehumanizing, and it is definitely not a game. 2K took one look at that and added Team Deathmatch for the side. However, Assassin's Creed managed to avoid most series multiplayer woes, even though it was almost certainly a mandate Ubisoft threw in for the marketing buzzword. I think a big difference was just the team's openness to exploring the concept in the first place. See, Brotherhood was not the first time Ubisoft Montreal considered a multiplayer option for the series. In fact, they had tinkered with the idea all the way back in Assassin's Creed the original. At one point, there was some consideration of drop-in, drop-out cooperative gameplay for the first game. Now, I'm just speculating here, but I suspect this is even why the prototype footage for Prince of Persia Assassins has two assassins doing some fairly dynamic action right at the end. System limitations and the story's concept of the Animus led them to scrapping the idea, but there was clearly at least a small amount of code lingering from having two players present. One guy stumbled into a glitch that spawned in a second Altair in the game world, most likely a remnant of the co-op tinkering. Since co-op was barely a vestigial feature, Altair Jr. just mirrors the player's actions, and amusingly enough, the game desyncs when Altair assassinates himself. The idea of multiplayer was clearly not abandoned after that, though. Think back to my last video, if you watched it. If you didn't watch it, go do so now, before I have to seduce which family member you least want seduced. I'm warning you, I am not bluffing. In that video, I went over Assassin's Creed 2 multiplayer. This iPod game was the first multiplayer in the series, and because Ubisoft had already considered multiplayer once before, this is the primary reason I theorized there that this game was to test gameplay concepts for a bigger release down the line. A bit of foreplay, if you will, to see if Social Stealth Online would be down to fuck for real. Social Stealth Online was so down to fuck, turns out. Gameplay was adapted pretty cleanly over from single player's concepts and executed extremely well, which, at the end of the day, is the real reason Assassin's Creed Online escaped the usual multiplayer blues of other single player titles. At its most basic level, up to 8 people would be thrown into an arena version of the single-player cities, and each person would be assigned a different player as a target. You have to try and kill without being killed yourself. Most other games that go for multiplayer stealth attempt asynchronous multiplayer, where stealthy characters have entirely different abilities and moves than non-stealthy players, but this is truly synchronous multiplayer stealth. To do stealth multiplayer, of course, you have to sneak. Each game has a selection of distinct characters, and once everyone has picked one, the map will be populated with duplicates. These non-player characters look exactly like you, but they act like normal civilians. they don't sprint around, they don't climb buildings, they never repaint the sidewalk in cranium pink, and so on. While you can do these things will blow your cover, so your goal is to act like you aren't there. Blending and hiding are equally important whether you are hunting someone or being hunted yourself. I shouldn't have to explain that hiding keeps murderers from finding you as quickly, so I won't. But if you're too conspicuous approaching your murderee, they have a chance to stun your murderous ass, and you can lose them as your contract entirely. The better you are doing, the more people will hunt you at one time, and conversely, the lower your score, the more likely you are to have time without pursuers, which gives you better time to try and catch up to the homicide experts around you. Scoring is also higher the stealthier and more focused you are. There's a meter that depletes if you move in high profile within line of sight of your target, so attempting to Call of Duty your way around the map might get you a lot of kills, but will leave you really low on the scoreboard at the end. I've seen quite a few people play like that across all of the games, and frankly, they almost always are losers. There are also point bonuses for specialized kills, such as kills from a hiding spot, and if you really want to gamble on a higher score, there's an additional bonus you can get if you stand next to your target undetected for several seconds before you strike. If someone approaches too blatantly though, it can also trigger a pursuit, along the lines of those single-player scenes where a fat asshole somehow manages to stay ahead of Ezio for minutes at a time. Environmental features like cargo lifts and closing gates will give the fleeing target a few seconds of extra time to get away or hide, and yes, you get extra points for successful getaways. There are also loadouts of abilities and tools you can use to personalize your gameplay. Some of them carry over directly from single player. To name a few, smoke bombs temporarily incapacitate targets and hunters alike. Coin purses cause NPCs to scramble for money that the real players obviously don't go for. And guns, shoot people who keep running everywhere or won't get off the fucking rooftops. There are also abilities original to the multiplayer itself, like a disguise that makes you look like a different character, a disguise that makes every NPC nearby look like you, or a hack that immediately uses all of the interactables in your proximity. These abilities are all on cooldown timers, so you can't just use them frivolously, but they absolutely can be used for some creative techniques, or exciting turn of events. Those basics cover all 4 entries. I'll get into how this stuff evolved momentarily, but I don't want to get too clinical, analytical, or anal about things until I have expressed, holy shit, is this concept incredible. It feels right at home with the single player experience, it is better at tension and intimidation than some horror games, and it is truly unique compared to what games usually put together for competitive multiplayer. I'm not aiming to shit on other games, because I know plenty of developers put a lot of time and effort into their online as well, but I am just not a huge fan of going online in most games. Other people kind of suck, and I rarely want to rise to the occasion of competing against them when there's a comfortably idiotic AI foe in single player, but this multiplayer is different. I definitely spent more time playing Brotherhood online than any other multiplayer in my life, and I actually consider myself pretty decent at these too. If this were only a decent or okay multiplayer like Arkham Origins had, I would have written about 3 paragraphs, gotten bored, strangled my mango, so to speak, and moved on. These games get a single player diehard raving about them. That is no small feat. Of course, with each new title will be modifications. It's sort of like why your mother always sleeps with the quirky Danish guy who lives next door instead of your father, because Daddy-o likes the same position for the same 31 seconds every time, she understandably gets bored, and so it's safe to assume the same can be said of online gamers, considering how much they know about your mother's labia. If the games didn't change, they'd stagnate and bore. Most of the mechanical changes were certainly for the better, but there are a few gripes in the mix too. First off, customization got deeper as the sequels came along. Brotherhood more or less gave you alternate colors for each character's clothing, which is pretty simple, but by Black Flag, characters have different unlockable costumes, weapons, and even tweakable abilities. These are for the better. The later games also add in currencies so that you have to buy things you've unlocked, which feels more like an attempt to push microtransactions, which is definitely a gripe. One change I'm mixed on is the incognito meter. In Brotherhood, you start out incognito by default, but in Revelations, the meter starts out 1 degree lower and only raises up to incognito in the presence of your target. This attempt was certainly to try and encourage stealth, as you now lose your stealth faster if you just run around everywhere, but I'm a little mixed on this point because now, when you come across players who do just run everywhere, it's going to be very hard to get up to incognito even if you are being completely stealthy. This change stayed around for the rest of the titles, but with tweaks to scoring and the other systems, it doesn't feel quite as punishing in those. Revelations also beefed up this stun option, but frankly a little too much so. The icon becomes visible just about any time from any angle within range, so getting a focus kill is almost never worth the gamble anymore. Thankfully, 3 remedied this in a brilliant way. Stuns were moved to the same button as kills, so in the same way you have to be sure about who your target is, you have to be sure it really is a pursuer. Otherwise, you'll kill a civvy and lose your contract. The final point I want to highlight is with the kill animations themselves. Originally, characters would just always do this huge animation with their weapon of choice. While it is certainly cool to look at, it is also very obvious. And so in Brotherhood, at least, you would see these extended murder chains where 3 or 4 kills would happen all at once in the same area because the animations were giving everyone away. Later games would save the big and obvious animations for low stealth kills, and high stealth kills would be considerably more discreet, so as not to set a neon "kick me" sign right on your testicles. Each game's cast has to be pretty visually distinctive in order for the gameplay to function, of course. Honestly, I really think Brotherhood has the best cast. Most of the characters were represented in single-player content, so we know all about these lovable rapists, murderers, and wife-beaters. Not all-inclusively, there was a plague doctor, an executioner, the creepy one, the sexy one, the creepy sexy one, the one that most closely resembled an assassin, thereby always getting taken immediately, and the fat fugly one I always hated playing as. Revelations casts weren't all as special, but still had some solid choices, like the Deacon, the Crusader, the Renegade, who is a badass in single player as well, I might add, the Plague Doc, wait a minute, the creepy one. These are just cashing in on the same popular characters from last time. Let's see, there's the sexy, oh come on, this is the exact same chick as before. Come on guys, give me something to work with. They're alright, I guess. 3 did not really lift any of its cast out of its single-player content, which is a shame, and though I feel most of the characters were not nearly as memorable, they do all fit the revolutionary period quite well. My big exception is the Night Stalker, who is very cool. Black Flag's cast is remarkable, just in that the cast is distinct looking in the first place, considering it is made up of a pirate, a pirate, a pirate, a pirate, a fabulous Joker pirate. I think you get the picture. It also repeats some of 3's characters, proving that the character design team can't go more than one game without repeating themselves. Of course, I can't go more than one episode without talking about a playable character putting their dick in something uncomfortable, so I'll be generous and say all 4 games get special acknowledgement. As with any online game, you need to have some variety as you play to mix things up now and again. Every game has Wanted, which is the basic gameplay already described. In Brotherhood, there's also Manhunt, where the players are divided into 2 teams of 4, all of the same character, and teams have separate rounds to hunt or be hunted. Assassinate doesn't assign you a contract, but if you see someone and lock onto them, they immediately become your contract, so you pick them as you see them. Chest capture loosely resembles Capture the Flag, where one team is assigned to go stand by a chest that the other team is trying to defend to get points. Alliance is Manhunt, but with 3 teams, hunting in a full circle like Wanted, and Escort, your team is bodyguarding an NPC character from other players. Revelations got rid of absolutely nothing, yet added even more. This got problematic because of how many modes it was now dividing the player base between. You'd very commonly get dropped into a mode you didn't want because a game type needed more players. Deathmatch was the first new one. The map is smaller, there is no more radar, and players don't have any duplicates in the crowds, making it more or less Where's Waldo, the video game. Steal the Artifact and Artifact Assault add in a second and third Capture the Flag mode, where you work solo or with a team, respectively, to steal the artifact for yourself. Finally, Corruption is like HIV Simulator. One person is corrupted and hunts the others, and once they are killed, they too are corrupted, passing it on until the last virgin gets away. 3 whittled down the list, removing Escort, Chest Capture, Steal the Artifact, and Corruption, adding in only 2 new modes to remove the bloating. 1, Domination sees teams trying to capture and defend territories from the other side. The other, Wolfpack, is the most dramatically different of the bunch. Purely cooperative, and even playable without other people, everyone is tasked to kill NPC targets, with a ticking timer that extends the more points you gain. Black Flag removed only Assassinate, which had been around since Brotherhood, and added only a game lab where you can customize settings from the other modes to make a more personalized experience. Did you know the multiplayer has plot though? Not a lot, I mean. You'll find just as much plot in the online video about the red-headed tenant who doesn't pay her rent with money. But there is something there. Brotherhood started simple. Vidic, in the big room with all the Animus cubicles Desmond and Lucy ran through in Assassin's Creed 2, has set up the program so special Abstergo agents can get assassin skills through the bleeding effect. The end. Revelations takes it a step further. This time, an agent, from first-person point of view, did so well in the big room he's getting to go further up the secret conspiracy corporate ladder. As you do well, he gets a lavish lifestyle, eventually becoming a Master Templar, where he gets violated so Warren can watch him forever. Ya perv. The end. 3 gets much less insidious. See, instead of all that stuff, this time Abstergo's evil plan is to release this as a video game. Huh. As you go, there are a bunch of little corporate videos available to watch, painting Abstergo as any trendy marketing company like we see in real life, and hacker collective group Erudito shows you how these videos are actually evil. It's definitely not a big dire threat like the mind control satellite Abstergo wanted to launch for the first several games. Oh well. The end. Black Flag is the same corporate release game concept, except this time even Erudito didn't bother to show up to the table. So instead it's just one dude trying to be hip, talking about pirates, matey.
Get some friends and get fighting. Arr!
The end. Considering that certain online shooters throw out more sequels than Dwarf Dick in a Snow White porn parody, only having 4 Assassin's Creed titles with this seems comparatively paltry, like the Dwarf Dicks you will see in a Snow White porn parody. So what happened? Well, 2 answers really. The first, Assassin's Creed Unity. Unity made the executive decision to include cooperative base game missions, and since Ubisoft didn't want to draw resources or players away from their co-op, they didn't include competitive multiplayer. At the time though, developers did express interest in returning to the competitive concept for future titles. The reason they didn't is because of our second reason, Assassin's Creed Unity. Unity's launch was, to say the least, messier than a deep forest dwarf orgy. All of the glitches and bugs were, frankly, doing damage to the brand name in the public eye, and so when the time came for the next entry, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, the devs specifically showcased the single-player-only game as a way to demonstrate all resources would be going into making a game that wouldn't melt its characters' faces off. Following games essentially lived by the same mantra, and I could no longer penetrate my pal Austin from behind, at least not without making his wife angry. Yes, I do have a conclusive point for this episode, because as beloved as multiplayer is, it would be tricky to get the ball rolling again by now, since gameplay and public perception have both shifted so much at this point in the series' history. If I were to suggest anything to Ubisoft, which I am because this is my video and I am God here, I would recommend the following. The multiplayer can absolutely come back, but I don't think it should go on as a tacked-on mode bundled with each single-player campaign. Do one single, conclusive, but entirely separate spin-off as a download title. Maybe it can be cheaper than a full release, maybe it could even be, dare I say it, free to play and you can get your profit from cosmetic items. A recently huge idea I know you would love to cash in on. Include a bunch of characters and maps from all across the entire series. Maybe the Plague Doctor alongside a Spartan warrior, a cheeky English gangster, and a sexy Viking. Whatever. Make everything unlockable through natural gameplay for people who don't want to pay extra, introduce a few new characters and maps whenever a new single-player title brings around a new setting, and you might just have a self-sustaining multiplayer again. Resources don't have to come out of the main series focus, nobody's face has to melt, and I can get back to my passion of forcing it deep inside a stranger when no one's looking again. Without further ado, I definitely want to thank the many video sources used here, links all in the description below. Next time we're hopping back into the single player again, so swing by if you want to see Ezio's side of the franchise wrapped up. Here's the playlist for the other videos. If you've missed out on them, subscribe and click the bell to be alerted for more, and thank you all for watching. So who wants to see my penis now?